Welcome onto the Accent Training Podcast, Urmi. How are you doing today, miss?
I'm good, and you?
Great, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you on here. Urmi has a lot to bring to the table, a message of empowerment that she wants everyone to hear. And so, well, tell us about yourself a little bit, Urmi. What would you like our listeners to know about you today?
Yes, it'll be my pleasure, and thank you for having me. My name is Urmi, and I'm based in Montreal. I am a full-time employee in the financial services industry, but I do a lot of things on the side. I'm a big advocate for women's empowerment. I am involved with few organizations that work towards that. I'm also a speaker, self-published author, a blogger, YouTuber, and a polyglot. So that's who I am.
A little bit of everything. You're really getting your voice out there.
Yes,
So,
definitely.
I noticed, like, just looking at your social media, yeah, the women's empowerment stuff. You're the social media, like the head of social media for this movement. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, so there is an organization that I'm part of. It's called Women in Leadership, and we are based in Canada. And each province, or basically each city, has a chapter. And I am based in Montreal, but I am part of the chapter in Victoria. So I volunteer for them virtually. And basically, their organization itself, it's called Women in Leadership, and their job is to empower more women in leadership positions in their workplaces. So we offer like a lot of workshops, webinar, in-person events, where basically everything is more around the theme of leadership, like how can we use, let's say, public speaking? How can we use our voice to, better advocate for ourselves? How can we use public speaking in the workplace? We also provide workshops about LinkedIn. How can we use LinkedIn to leverage our skills? So it's all around that team. And I am the social media lead. So what I do is that I handle the social media account for our chapter, and I do basically like live interviews with coaches. I promote the events that we have. I basically post on a regular basis. I also post like empowerment quotes. So that's my job, is just to promote our chapter as much as possible and get more women to join our community.
That's awesome. So my understanding is that essentially you're teaching women how to use the technologies to maximize their potential, like, the different social medias and stuff like that. Is that kind of how you'd put it?
No, no, no.
Oh,
I
okay.
no, I don't do that.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so we invite coaches, like female coaches who have their business, their services, to teach the women in our community. And my job is to promote these events that we have. So that's what I do. One that we had recently, literally, I think a month ago, was about like public speaking, how to use your voice to be more confident. So we had a coach coming in. She gave like this virtual webinar where she was just giving like some tips and skills and strategies on how you can basically use your voice and what's the best way to like basically promote yourself using public speaking.
That's huge because, like, a lot of our listeners right now are people who use their voice as a tool every
Mm-hmm.
day,
Mm-hmm.
typically for work. It's such a powerful tool. So, were there any tips that stood out that, you feel help people use their voice more powerfully?
Okay, so this one thing that I didn't tell you is I'm part of the Toastmasters Club. I don't know if you're familiar with this club, which is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to improve your public speaking skills. And I've been part of this club for about 4 or 5 years already, and I am an active member. So basically, like I join the meetings, we do like speeches, I deliver speeches, and you get to learn more about public speaking, and because you get feedback from the members. But I'm also the VP of education in my own club. So I learned a lot about public speaking by being part of the Toastmasters Club. And I also watch like a lot of TED Talk. I also watch a lot of things on YouTube on like how you can deliver your speeches in a like how you can best deliver your speeches. And some of the things that I learned like throughout my experience with Toastmasters is that when you are delivering speeches, there are a few things that you want to remember. The first one is you don't want to memorize your speech. You don't want to memorize your script, because if you are giving a speech and you have a moment where you just like blank, you don't remember what to say, like it's not gonna look good when you're delivering your speech, because people will notice that you just went like blank and you're like, you do not know your next line. So when you're giving a speech, it's always important that you don't memorize, that you try to be basically like know what the core message is, but try to have like a structure, like the introduction, body, and conclusion. And you make sure to have like a way to like make it flow nicely, the presentation. You always want to make sure that you're very natural and spontaneous, because we want to see your authentic self when you're giving a speech, and we don't want to see a machine just repeating whatever they have written in their script. It's also very important to practice as much as possible, because practice makes you perfect. And it's very important also to have a story. So we always say that the best speakers are storytellers, and storytelling is what connects your audience to yourself and to your story, because every story has a message, every story has a lesson. And I think stories makes you connect strongly with the audience, and the audience feels very connected to the speaker. So it's when you're telling a story, people can relate to it most likely. So it's something that will make a great impact to your audience. It's very important that you practice, that you don't memorize, that you are natural, spontaneous, and that you are a storyteller. So those are a few things I have learned throughout my experience with Toastmasters.
Simple sounding things to adapt, like be good at telling stories, but not as easy as it sounds, right? Like, how can someone become a good storyteller?
I honestly think everyone very much enjoys listening to a nice story, because you're going to deliver the story within your speech. So, of course, you're going to have a nice introduction leading up to your speech and leading up to the story. So you just want to have like a nice introduction that catches like everyone's attention. And then you want to have the story in the middle of the speech, like as part of like it's like in the body of your speech. And you always want to make sure that you have like the story is related to an example. Something that happened in particular, like once I was walking on the street and I bumped into, I don't know, George Clooney, like you want to make sure that it's like catchy. And I think that will be like something that captivates the attention of your audience. And I think you want to have always a key takeaway message in your story, because people are there to listen to you because they want to get something out of it. Like you want them to be interested in your story because there is something that it's coming out of it. There is a message. There is a key takeaway that they can use, like a practical useful tip that they can use. So I always say like a story has to have that type of thing. Like, it's a little bit like when we're listening to a podcast or, when we are watching something, it's because we want to get something out of it that we can use ourselves. So I always feel like as long as the story has a good, moral, a good message or key takeaway, tip that they can use, I think it makes it very useful, because people will be like, oh, that's a good idea. Maybe I can use it in my own life too. So I always try to have that perspective when I'm telling a story.
So there has to be a good point to the story, not just drolling on and on and on, but it's got to come to an ending, and that ending has to mean something.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's what we get from stories, is a lesson
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day. We just get a new perspective, and I like the way that you put it as well. Like it's easy to follow if people can kind of picture themselves in that position. Like you say, I was walking down the street. Well, we've all done that. And I met George Clooney. And then it's kind of like throws off your imagination a little bit, because that's an unexpected turn. I like how you break that down. So why do you dedicate so much to improving communication skills of yourself and others? Like, why is this the skill that you focus on the most?
So let's start with public speaking and communication skills. I would say that definitely those are the that's the scariest thing that one person can do. Like people are really scared of public speaking. They're really scared of like going in front of a crowd, speaking in front of a public. And that was something that I also feared a lot for a long time. And when I was going to business school, okay, one thing you have to know is that we need to do a lot of presentations, and I was not good at all, like zero. I felt like I was not able to sell a product. I was not able to sell a service. I was always very, very nervous. And then afterwards, I was like, you know what? I need to get over this fear. And because of that, I wanted to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And public speaking, something very, very uncomfortable for me. And I I feel like I also needed that boost of confidence. So that's why I joined Toastmasters. And I was like, I need to work on my public speaking skills because I feel like not many people actually put their time to work on public speaking skills. And I think it's a very important skill, I think, because you can use it in every aspect of your life. You need public speaking, you need communication skills on your daily basis. Like when you're interacting with your client, when you're interacting with a colleague, when you're interacting with your partner, with your spouses. I think it's very important because you know how to deliver your message, you know how to persuade someone. If you are using, persuasion skills, you know how to convince someone, you know how to use your emotion to deliver a message. And I think it's very important. And with public speaking, one thing that I really learned is that it's never about what you say, but it's about how you say it. So I got to learn all these different things about, body languages. I got to learn about, eye contact. There are different things that I have learned. And I feel like since I've been working on my public speaking skills, I have got a lot more confidence and I started to believe a lot more in myself. And I started to see that I was able to, transfer all of this in other aspects of my life because it was just showing that I was a much more confident person. And I think public speaking is it's underestimated how important it is, but it's so important. I think it's the biggest investment that you can do to yourself. So that's why for me, it has been really, really important.
Folks, this is just a quick message to remind you to subscribe to the Accent Training Podcast. If you haven't already, you don't want to miss a second of this accent training experience. And you want to be updated whenever I've got new content out for you. So if you haven't subscribed, hit subscribe now. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially like the persuasion part. That's something that, like, just coincidentally, you mentioned that. And some of my most recent episodes have been about idiomatic expressions for like conflict resolution and kind of debating kind of stuff, because persuasion is so important in whatever language that you're speaking. Because suppose you're having an argument with a native English speaker, someone who grew up their whole life, they've always spoken English, or a French speaker because you're in Montreal. So suppose you get into an argument with a French speaker, and how are your French skills? Would you say they're as good as your English? Because your English is like top notch, but your French skills, how are they?
French is my fourth language, and I do work in a French environment.
Oh, so you're really good, eh?
I'm
I mean,
good.
not that I'm good at it. I'm good at Spanish, but French not so much.
I'm
But
good. I can say I speak it, so I'm good.
how good, yeah. Now, suppose you're like walking around a farmer's market and you're looking to buy some honey, and there's a local, Quebecer, and they want to sell you this honey for like double the price of what it would be, in a grocery store or something. How, like, are you confident that you'd be able to maybe talk them down in the price, or that you could have the persuasion skills, or do you think it might be tougher in French than in another language?
I don't think it's about I don't think it's about the language that we use. It's more about how we try to persuade them. Because one thing I can tell you is that I do use a little bit of bargaining of my bargaining skills when I try to buy some stuff. It did occur to me that I had to bargain a couple of times, and this happened when I was in UK and I was trying to buy some clothes, and I'm talking about like traditional South Asian clothes, like we wear a lot of saris, and a lot of the stores are basically South Asian people. They are owned by South Asian people, and often they don't put the price in of their items in the store. So when you go there, you ask them what the price is. They tell you a number, but you do not know if it's a true number because sometimes they like basically increases their prices right in the moment that you ask them the price. And because I know about this type of things, I usually bargain in that moment. And one of the things that I do is that sometimes I have to speak to them in English or I have to speak to them in Bengali. And in that moment, I had to persuade them to lower the prices. So I don't know if I'm like a good persuader, but one of the things that I usually tell them is that, look, I come from far. I'm like, I'm not a local here. You have to understand my position. I tell them that I usually also start to tell them that, like people in the same market are selling your item at a lower price, which is based on a fact. I tell them that, like this is for an important occasion. Um, I usually I become very dramatic. That's my problem. I put a lot of drama into it, and probably that's not something that I want other people to do. But I become really, really dramatic.
It's a tool. It's a communication tool, right? Yeah, that's persuasion.
Yeah, I go with my emotions. I sound super dramatic. I try to come up with some facts that, like people are selling your same item at much cheaper price. I'm coming from far. It took me a lot of hours to be here. And I tell them how good they are, like how good their store is, which is true. Everything I say is like based on like truth. And I try to be genuine in this. Usually it works. Like all of these things that I have done, they did the work because they did lower the prices. So I never think it's about the language that you're using. It's really about the way you're saying something. So whether you're using English, Italian, French, or whatever, it's never about that. It's really just how convincing you are. Because if you're someone who's like rude and not nice, that no one is willing to give you like a better price. So it's you want to be genuine and in a nice way as well. Like you don't want to be rude at all with the person who, they're also trying to make money. They're also running a business. They're also trying to survive. It's really coming to a compromise. It's a win. It has to be a win-win situation.
Totally. It's about how you approach it. Like, I've had experiences, negotiating prices in English, and I just learned from my parents. And essentially, yeah, I would just go in and cut the price in half and then meet them up in the middle kind of thing. It doesn't work the same here. I'm living in Mexico right now. It doesn't work in the Mexican culture. Like they're just like, no, get out of here. Like they do not care. You have to, like you said, you have to use tactics that are a little bit of flattery, kind of come in maybe with a bit of a backstory of why you need this, and try to, again, storytelling. Yeah, it works even when you're trying to dicker on the price. Yeah.
I feel like it's also a little bit different from a seller's point of view because if you're someone who's selling something, you have to put it in a way that you're selling a solution to a problem. And like you said, I also think you need a storytelling because let's take the example of the strawberry. Like you have people coming to your market and they want to buy something and you're trying to sell strawberries. I think one way to put it down as like, this is how I'm going to convince the buyer to buy it is that you want to have a story of like, oh, this is where the strawberries grew. They come from this far, like this part of Mexico. And you want to tell them that, they are like, we put so much love into grow them, and you can tell them that with strawberries you can make so many things. You can make pies, you can make jam, you can put the you can make cake, and that's how you can sell the item to the buyer. So even there you have to like come up with tactics, but it's always like a solution. It's always a problem to it's always a solution to a problem that we are trying to sell. So I think even there you need a storytelling, you need tactics to sell it. And usually it works. Honestly, it works.
So it's on both sides. If you're going in, you want to get the price lowered down, you got to come in with a story. You got to be prepared. And if you're selling something, you got to have a story of how this is going to benefit people, how this is going to solve, oh, these are the ideal strawberries for jam, for pancakes, for a birthday cake,
Yeah. Yeah,
I see.
exactly.
That's cool. Very good. So something that you mentioned as well is the other languages that you speak. And I believe so far you've said English, French, Bengali. So what are the others? Because that's 3, but I suspect there's more to come. What else do
Yeah,
you speak? I'm just curious.
there is Italian and there is un poquito de español.
How did you go about learning all these languages?
Some were by choice and some were not by choice. Definitely, I did start very, very young. And I would say that my mother tongue is Bengali. And I always say that Italian is my adopted mother tongue because basically both of my parents are from Bangladesh. And that's the language I was taught when I was born. But as soon as I started to go to school, which was in Italy, I started to pick up Italian much faster and I brought Italian at home. And so with my sister, we basically communicated and communicate in Italian, purely in Italian. And with my parents, I speak just Bengali, but now I do a mix of Italian and Bengali. And then in the education system in Italy, you have to learn English by default. So that was not by choice, but I'm pretty sure I would have chosen anyway. And then I had to learn French. It was another language that we had to learn along with the German. However, I completely forgot German. I don't remember any words of German. I used to know how to speak it. I used to know how to read it. I knew a lot about the grammar. I even got like a certificate saying that I know how to speak German, but I completely lost it. And then, of course, I live in Canada. I live in Montreal, so it's a very bilingual city, and I have to use French Quebecois in my workplace. And I worked for many years in an English environment, but it's been more than a year that I've been working in a French environment, and that's because I wanted to. That was my goal. I didn't want to, I spoke English so much that I was like, I wanna change this, and I've been working in a French environment, and I very, very much enjoy it. And when I was in university, I started with Spanish, and Spanish was probably like the best thing ever. Like I love the Spanish language. I love the way it sounds. I love everything related to the Spanish culture. I love anything that is related to Spain, anything related to Latin American countries. Like it's the way it sounds is just so beautiful. So Spanish, I took a couple of classes, and I was pretty advanced, and then I had to stop because I was done with university. But it has been something that I've been working on. I listen to podcasts in Spanish. I watch like videos in Spanish, and I try to keep my Spanish alive that way. But my goal is to eventually become fully fluent in Spanish. Like I just want to be able to speak it. But I do understand quite a lot, and I think it's because of my Italian knowledge.
So that is a fascinating and unique language learning journey that you've had, speaking at Bengali as a child, as an infant, and then quickly changed to Italian. And then you and your sister brought that into the house because you had all these secrets that you could tell. Your parents had no idea what you were talking about, probably drove them nuts. And so they had to learn. That's so cool. And how are they now, after having learned as adults learning Italian? Is their Italian good or so?
Yeah, I would say my dad, he can speak Italian pretty well, My mom, she never made so much of an effort to learn it because she basically depended a lot on us to translate for her. But she's also very independent in the sense that when she would do things on her own, like she would go to the grocery, she would still like be able to communicate, even if it was like a little bit, even if it was few words. She did, she was able to communicate, but she was never able to have like a full complete, like she was never able to do like a full complete sentence in Italian because we were always with her to translate everything. But my dad, he knows how to speak it. Like people would go, like people from the community would go to him to have documents translated. So imagine.
Oh, so he was, I mean, for him, it was a matter of, putting food on the table kind of thing. It was like learn Italian and you can survive. Exact. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
That's quite a motivation.
yeah, yeah.
Indeed. Yeah.
Hmm.
But as you can see, yeah, now he's got that skill and he's not going to lose it. I imagine he still lives in Italy, right? So,
No, he doesn't. He lives in UK.
oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh, and so English, that was another challenge for him, another hurdle, maybe.
exactly. But English, it's something that because back in Bangladesh, because it was a British colony, they basically learned English at school, but it's I feel like he doesn't speak it as good as Italian.
But the cool thing is, so many people after a certain age, you start to feel like, oh, I'm too old to learn a new language. It can't be done. But right there with your parents, you see the difference. It's about what is what's driving you, what you can put into it. Like your father was like, all right, I got a family to feed, better learn this language. And he set his mind to it and he could pull it off. And then your mom, she, of course, I'm sure she's, like you said, she's very strong in many ways, but she did have her daughters around to translate. She had like a translator, and she didn't have to use that muscle or the same effort kind of thing. And it just didn't develop. So it doesn't matter what your age is, it's just about what you can put into it. However, of course, as you get older, it gets a little bit more difficult. Like they say, after the age of 25, it gets tougher. So, do you have any tips for adults, over 25 who feel like it's too late to learn a new language, but they really like the sound of Japanese or, they like the sound of Turkish and they want to learn it?
You can't learn a language after a certain age. I don't know if it's a myth. I don't like to believe in it. I always think no matter what you do in life, it's never, never too late. Never. And it's not just about learning a language. It could be anything. I think that when it comes to learning languages, I think the reason why people say it's difficult is because after a certain age, especially after when you're like after 25, probably your priorities are a little bit different. And so because you're busy with work, maybe because you're busy with your personal commitment, you don't find the time to learn a language. But it's not that you can't, it's just you're not putting the time to learn it. Because I think if you are driven, if you have a motivation, you will always find time for it. And I think for adults especially because we have to think about working. We're not anymore students. Probably that's why also the difference is that we're in different phase of our life. Because when you're a student, it's easier to learn because all you're doing is just studying for something. You don't have to work, you don't have to feed people. But after 25, probably you're like married, probably you have to take care of your parents. Things change, so you don't find time. But I think some of the things that I would highly recommend for someone after a certain age wanting to learn is that you always want to make sure that you create the time. And it doesn't have to be, an hour. It can literally be 30 minutes, and you can listen to a podcast when you're going to work. You can listen to something while you're driving. You can listen to something while you're walking. If you're working full time, you can use your lunch hour to, 30 minutes to eat and 30 minutes to do something. And you can like read a book, and it could be easy book. You can watch content on YouTube, and that could be something really, really easy. And if you don't have the time at all, I think 15 minutes is also enough as well. I think it's just, you know, doing something every day, doing something little every day, like small actionable, like small action that you can do on a daily basis, but which on a long term, they will accumulate and they will just be part of the bigger goal. Because I also work full time, and sometimes, like even when I work on my Spanish, I feel like, okay, I have not put the time. I try to block that time off my calendar, so I know that I have to, like, I cannot have other distractions. So I am just focusing on that, and I try to do like a little bit, like, when I'm taking the bus, I'm listening to something. When I'm like at home, for instance, instead of scrolling on your phone, you can watch like a 10 minutes video. I also think that Instagram, even though it's like social media, there is good content. Like there are people like you, there are other like people that have good content that you can use to learn vocabulary. And so I think it's always important to create that time, just blocking off that time. And one thing that I can highly suggest that if you want to make it a bit more fun and enjoyable is, and it's something that I have used myself, is when I was trying to practice my French a couple of years ago, I basically found a coworker from France, and I used to have lunch with him, and I would only speak to him in French. So it was a win-win situation because I was having lunch with him, and I was also practicing my French, and I was just speaking in French about everything that happened. So that's also something, you have to be strategic about it, So it was a good thing to do because I was not putting any effort in it. It was just me speaking in French, and I wasn't paying anyone, and it was free. So
The way that I like to encourage people to learn is exactly what you're doing. I call it habit building. Like you're building a habit of not only, meeting a French person and forcing yourself to use it, which is a little bit daunting at first, but then once you do it once and you do it again and again, and not only do you make a new friend, but like you say, you're building a habit of friendly conversation in that language. It's really cool. Like you say, there's so many things that you can do throughout the day, just small habits.
yeah, exactly. Talking about habits and maybe something that might be useful for 2024, it's the book Atomic Habits. I don't know if you have read it. I don't remember. I think his name is James Clear, the author. He wrote this book called Atomic Habits, which is probably one of the best book that you can read if you want to work on your habits. And I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it.
You're seriously the third guest over the last 3 years that's recommended that book. And I haven't picked it up yet. And so I think I have to now after
Yes.
hearing it 3 times. Because
Yes.
okay, you're right. I'm gonna just check right now. I can get it on my Kindle, I suppose. Atomic Habits. I'm gonna buy it, and that'll be my son's bedtime story. Well, I know that you've got a busy day. You've got a lot to do. So, tell me, where can our listeners find you if they want to hear more of what you've got to say, or if they want to follow your journey? Where can they find you online?
Yes, so I have a YouTube channel. It's called Urmi Hossain. And basically on this channel, I talk about different things, but I have a section for interviews where I invite people who are language coaches. And basically I ask them about their journey with languages. I ask them how they are running their services. And I also ask them for tips and how can people find them. How people can find them. And I also have a blog called myways.ca. I also have a LinkedIn profile called Urmi Hossain where people can just connect with me. I also have my book on Amazon. It's called Discovering Your Identity, a Rebirth from Interracial Struggles. I do talk about my experience being a third culture kid. I also have some ebooks related to learning Italian. And I have my Instagram account called Urmanio.
Of this episode so that everybody can check it out. Follow along with Urmi's journey. Learn something from her. Clearly, she has a lot to share. Do you have any final thoughts, any powerful pieces of advice or words of empowerment that you'd like to share with our audience that can help them just take one more step forward and maybe get through their own rough time on their language learning journey?
Like, I'm a big advocate for language learning because I think there is, like, it just opens you the world to like so many different things that you wouldn't be aware of if you were just sticking to one language, if you were just sticking to your own bubble. And so there's this quotation that says, like, if you know a second language, it's like you have a second soul. So I think it's the second soul just represents everything that you learn from that particular language, culture, traditions, people, food. So that's my message.